Well, you certainly tackled a behemoth. This is your first book, right? And who's actually read this book in the audience? Anybody read it? A couple of you.
Don't worry, I have family members that haven't read it either, so yeah.
So this is about the story of Eddie Aikau, who is a full-blooded Hawaiian and a hero for many reasons. And Stuart, why don't you just give us a little synopsis of why he is a Hawaiian hero and why he was the subject of your very first book?
Yeah. You know, hero is a word that I agonized over because people, on the one hand, use it so flippantly and just say, oh, he's a hero, and yet, growing up, I remember just thinking there were very few people that I really, truly looked up to and admired, you know, that stood the test of time, and the more and more I learned about Eddie, and I was kind of worried that I was going to, you know, overturn some dark stories or things of his past, and he was very human, don't get me wrong, and he had his flaws and his shortcomings, but he really was just, I found he embodied the spirit of aloha in a truly profound sense, and that he was willing to give everything to help people, including his life when it came to saving people. And so as a lifeguard, as a surfer, and as a sailor on the Hokulea, I was really just moved by, you know, his altruism and what he did for other people. And so he really kind of, for me, it was a word that really kind of summed him up. Yeah.
When you first moved to Hawaii, did you have knowledge of Eddie Aikau and his story, or was that something you discovered here?
Yeah. You know, I had heard about Eddie Aikau. And then when I moved here, you know, you saw the bumper stickers and, you know, the T-shirts, and so I just became intrigued. And I remember when I first started teaching, this woman who had sailed with Eddie on that ill-fated voyage in 1978, when they capsized, was working on an article about Eddie Aikau, and she said, you know, I know you're a writer and you just, you know, have written a lot of articles, and I'm working on this piece on Eddie Aikau, and I'd like to talk to you about it and just get your feedback. And so we sat down, and she told me this whole story of his life and watching him paddle away into this, you know, 8 to 10 foot waves into this maelstrom. And then at the end, she looked at me and she goes, do you think there's a story there? And I was like, oh my God, is there a story there? It's one of the most epic stories I've ever heard. I mean, it's just, it really is profound. But I was like, I don't know if you noticed, Jody pointed it out, but I am a tall, thin haole from the mainland. And I thought, I can't tell this story. And so there were, you know, a few years there where I just thought, I can't tell the story, but no one was telling the story. And a lot of people who knew Eddie, family members, and people who had sailed with him were getting older, and some were passing on. So finally got to the point where someone has to tell the story because it is truly epic.
Well, it's one of the funny things about living in a very small place is that people know what's going on, but they still know how to mind their own business. And in order to kind of tell somebody's story, you almost need the blessing from the ultimate ordained, or you need to be able to run really fast to get the heck out of Dodge once the thing hits the stands. But you know, had to spend a lot of time getting to know the people who are central, true life characters in the book, because Eddie was gone. So you never met him yourself, you didn't know the sound of his voice, and you had to find that voice through other people. So what is that process? Because I'm sure you don't automatically go, I'm going to write a book and just start. There must be a feeling out phase where you get to see if you can do this.
Yeah. I had started writing about surfing and talking to big wave surfers like Peter Cole and Fred Van Dyke, who were some of the first kind of pioneers of big wave surfing on the North Shore and surfing Waimea. And they introduced me to the Aikau family, thank God. And the Aikaus respected them so much. And Peter was a former teacher himself, and who used to play hooky all the time, by the way. He and Jose Angel, who was a principal of a high school out here. Jose got caught actually skipping school as the principal during one of the biggest swells and got his picture on the front page of the paper, and the superintendent said, if you're going to cut school, don't get your picture on the front page of the paper. So anyway, I met these just intriguing people, and they introduced me to the family. and got to know the family and got their blessing, which was really just an amazing thing. And probably the best part of writing the book was getting to know these people, because you literally spend hours with these people, and have tape recorders going, and so you have that intense interaction where they're telling these stories, and they go from riotously funny stories of the parties they would have at the ICAO compound in the graveyard. And for those of you who don't know, the ICAOs lived in a Chinese graveyard in the back of Boa, and still do, yes, behind Punch Bowl. And it was the most surreal setting to have parties, because they'd have wild parties, and literally the next morning they'd wake up and there'd be bodies all in the graveyard, just where people passed out. So I spent a lot of time in the graveyard, and then just you get to know these people, and so they'd go from these very funny stories to just we'd both be in tears talking to some of these big Hawaiian just really tough people, just in tears, and that was really incredible because you saw how much Eddie meant to them. And have a very, very strange personality in that I love people and meeting people and getting to know them. And then you also have to have a very, kind of almost reclusive side, where you have to then take all that information, transcribe these interviews, and then spend months and months working in your boxers throughout most of the day trying to put these stories together and weave them into a central narrative. But it was great. It was an amazing experience, and that's how I got to know Jody and Linda, his ex-wife, and Jody's mom, who, I have to tell you, their story was one of the most fascinating in the book, when they met Eddie in South Africa.